Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ray Thompson, and I want to welcome you all to our studio webinar series. This is episode 5, where we're talking about storage strategies for a distributed workforce. And we have some great guests today to talk about this topic. So first and foremost, again, I want to thank you all for joining. So if you want to go to the next slide. At the end of this webinar, you should have a solid understanding of the recent trends in storage in 2021, and the impact the pandemic has had on those trends. Things to consider when designing a hybrid environment from a storage perspective, and then ideas on how to enable a distributed workforce, all from, again, thinking from a storage perspective and a strategy perspective. And then some of the technologies on the horizon that are going to impact storage in general, which we'll talk about in the discussion section. So next slide. Real quick, just some logistics here. If you want to ask a question, just use the Q&A button in the Zoom chat. If you're watching this event on one of our social channels, thank you. Feel free to go ahead and ask a question there. We will have people monitoring all the social channels as well. And what we're going to do is at the end, take the questions and we'll answer a whole bunch live. We'll try and get to all of them if we can. And if we don't, we'll certainly answer those in the chat. And then when the session is over, we will send the recorded version out along with all of the answers to all the questions you guys asked throughout the session. So again, thank you very much to everybody for participating. Next slide. So here's our agenda. We have our goals, which we just went through, and the logistics. We're going to do an overview from Tom Coughlin, who's going to talk about context and trends. Then we'll do a little roundtable discussion between Tom, Ed, and myself, and then we'll get to the questions from the chats, and then we'll finish it up with some closing thoughts. So next one. So first and foremost, the panel. So my name is Ray Thompson. I'm the Senior Director here at Avid for Partner and Industry Marketing. And we're really honored to have our guest today. First and foremost, Ed Harper. Ed, will you please introduce yourself?
Certainly, thank you, Ray. Ed Harper, Director of Product Management here at Avid, specializing in the Nexus storage systems.
Excellent, thank you, Ed. And Tom Coughlin. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ray. I'm Tom Coughlin, and I've been involved in digital storage for over 40 years, engineer by background. I'm involved in engineering management, executive management. I have my own consulting firm, Coughlin Associates. We do a report on digital storage and media and entertainment. It's one of the big areas that I cover. I also put on storage events oriented towards media and entertainment and other areas. And then I do various types of consulting work. And a lot of what I'm going to be presenting today is from a 2020 report that I wrote on digital storage in professional media and entertainment.
That's excellent. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Ed, both of you for being part of this today. We're really excited about this one. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tom, who's going to set the table here with some market context. And Ed and I are just going to go off camera here for a minute. Tom, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Ed. I'm going to talk to you today about the changing world of media and entertainment storage. And in particular, things have really changed this last year. The COVID-19 pandemic basically changed the way we entertain ourselves and communicate. If you look at the trends shown here, streaming content use increased enormously after the shutdowns in the United States, at least starting in March timeframe. And remote communication resources of various types were considerably used. In fact, it's basically the way that many of us who were able to continue working were able to do so is by remote work, because basically we were all isolated from each other. As a consequence of this remote work, data centers that are being used that are either owned by an organization or run by public companies like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google's, etc. Those kind of data centers grew, as did many private data centers owned by organizations in order to meet the needs for that remote access. In particular, data storage trends. This actually is showing Seagate as one of the 3 manufacturers of hard disk drives, and the nearline high capacity hard disk drives that are used in data centers. This shows the total exabyte shipped that they had, and comparing 2019 to 2020 and the first quarter of 2021, we could see a considerable increase in that total capacity shipped in 2020 compared to 2019. In fact, this last first quarter of this year, we saw another bump in that storage capacity. Now, in addition to hard disk drive growth for these data center applications, solid state drives, the higher performance solid state drives also grew. These all enabled many application and use of many cloud-based resources. The hard disk drives used for secondary storage, the SSDs are oftentimes now used for primary storage. And some of this additional storage capacity of all types supported remote media and entertainment workflows. And just an idea of what things looked like. This was an entrance to a video set in 2020. It's a universal set entrance. It had temperature monitoring for people going in and out of the set. It had controlled entry. These are things that people did during the COVID pandemic in order to try to get back to normal in terms of work on the set, even though things weren't normal. There were periods when people were able to do this and periods not. It had a big impact on production this last year, which hopefully is starting to recover. We'll talk more about that. But we saw social distancing, wearing masks, various types of sanitation measures were important elements, and probably will continue to be important elements in reopening actual on-set experiences. And uploading content to an online source for remote proxy viewing and collaborative work were ways to get more people off the set. And that was another important, and probably again will continue to be with people more comfortable, greater use of collaborative activities, even when we're doing in-person set work. So it won't go back to business as usual. With the availability of vaccines, on-site work is returning, but the trends of moving some media workflow to the cloud have been accelerated to the pandemic, and this won't stop. Cloud, also the technology allows us remote production work as matured with great use of technology, such as LED walls, green screens, and computer graphic imagery in order to recreate remote sets, maybe to allow people to interact with each other, even though they're not physically in the same location. And that's the use of these technologies will enable faster, more cost-effective production and post-production work. And also maybe avoid some travel, allow greater remote collaboration, and enable greater access to a global talent pool. So let's look more deeply into the impact of the COVID pandemic on the media and entertainment storage. So first of all, let's take a look at annual storage capacity growth projections for digital content acquisition. This again is from this 2020 Digital Storage and Media and Entertainment report that I put out. In 2020, this pandemic slowed the production of feature film production with the introductions of and you can see that here in the 2020 numbers compared, for instance, 2019. With the introduction of the vaccines this year, I believe the feature film production should recover and then grow in the next few years. And this growth is driven by return to work, but it also is driven by multi-camera, high dynamic range, high frame rate, high resolution content, which will become more and more common and will drive the growth of media content generation and the required storage capacity to support it. We see here, this is a look at post-production storage capacity annual demand, the storage capacity needed in order to carry on post-production activities, both in the cloud, local network storage capacity, and local, mostly direct attached nonlinear editing storage. So we can see the impact of virtually shutting down much production work in 2020. Basically there was basically no growth over 2019, a little bit of a contraction, but no growth. But looking forward, again, driven by these return to work, but also by richer, more immersive content, which requires more storage, that the storage capacity is growing. And you can see that we're projecting a bump in the use of cloud storage as a supplement to these other storage types going forward. So there are various approaches that media and entertainment organizations take with regard to using resources in remote data centers like the cloud. Some organizations are looking to move particular activities to the cloud to reduce their CapEx expenses and trade that off for operating expenses. Also, as more activity goes on in the cloud, such as rendering and content distribution, which are pretty common nowadays, it leads to storing more content in the cloud and may pull more use of cloud resources and services. This concept is often called data gravity. The data, where the data is, tends to pull resources into it. However, cloud-based storage and applications are often considerably more expensive than if the resources were maintained on premises or in-house, assuming that the organization has enough experience and expertise to support this. And for this reason, some organizations only use the cloud to avoid over-provisioning with their local resources. In this case, they move some activities to the cloud when local capacities are maxed out. This is called cloud bursting. Online storage capabilities for the media and entertainment industry include multiple tiers of storage, rendering, metadata creation using AI, machine learning applications, including voice and text and facial image recognition, content delivery systems, and collaborative work such as production and post-production. Cloud resources and applications also have, of course, been a key part of being able to work remotely. The cloud is a storage, can be used and is used by many people as a storage tier. Particularly, this has been important for collaborative workflows, and these are remote workflows, using either private or public data center resources connected to the internet. It can provide material that can be either downloaded for local processing or sometimes processed directly in the cloud. To control cloud storage costs, for many users, the content stored in the cloud is often just a copy, and it won't be downloaded again to avoid egress fees. The only thing you download, for instance, in the case of editing, might be requested changes from the workflow. For instance, edit decision lists for remote nonlinear editors. And customers can use cloud services or different public cloud vendors. This is often called a multi-cloud environment. Some clouds, for instance, may have better rendering capabilities, some have better metadata extraction, some have lower egress costs. These are all factors in deciding what cloud to use for what. Cloud rendering, for instance, a popular media and entertainment application for who don't have their own rendering equipment or need more rendering than they currently are equipped for. Cloud storage can also be used to store disaster recovery copies of content, essentially an insurance policy. And there are organizations that use cloud storage for active archives. This may be more common for less than 3 petabytes of storage, but there are organizations with significant content resources that are storing much more than that as well. So again, COVID had big impacts on the use of the cloud in media and entertainment. With the pandemic start, many media houses had to make a sudden transition from working in a studio, from working from home, assuming they continue to do so. And this trend towards remote work, including collaborative workflows, that was already underway in the industry before the pandemic, but was accelerated by the pandemic, basically forcing us to make this the way we work. And although production work during the early months of the pandemic all but ceased, it's started to recover. It's gone through various phases of starting and then stopping. And with the current vaccines, we should be seeing a return to a modified normal of what things used to be. And what work was done in 2020, of course, was enabled by taking sanitation measures. And also special effect computers and various sorts of technologies were used to avoid large numbers of people on set, for instance, using LED walls, things like that. And another interesting thing, of course, is that CGI being done on computers basically was very little impacted. And things like animation, for example, it was easier to do that because you didn't have to have physical actors coming close to each other. So working at home, of course, increased the use of public and private cloud for production and post-production work. People uploaded and downloaded content from cloud storage repositories to continue their work. And several media companies have said their use of the internet and cloud resources won't decline, and the working from home will be a more common, even when it's safe for people to come on site again. So we're going to have a new way of working in this industry. And resources for media and entertainment work from home included virtual desktop interfaces to connect to private clouds, secure connection to private clouds, as well as various public cloud services, and the use of tools such as Slack, Discord for real-time work group coordination to replace that, going to the next cubicle and talking to somebody about something. Overall, the pandemic had a significant impact on media and entertainment production in 2020. We're recovering from that, or shall be recovering from that in 2021. It also brought a type of social isolation, and what interaction we've been able to have with people, of course, has been because of these technologies that we have. The tools such as WebEx, Zoom, BlueJeans, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, Slack, Discord, many other things have been put to the test from everything we do, from education to conferences, events, and various many types of work that people do. As a consequence, one would hope that these technologies have matured. We have more stable networks. We have more capable remote interaction tools. And examples of the kind of things to be done, the 2020 Hollywood Professional Alliance retreat happened just before the shutdown of the U.S., was demonstrating remote production, and also the Movie Labs has their 2030 vision, which involves an awful lot of work using the cloud, using remote work. So multi-clouds, media entertainment, there's a lot of companies offering different data processing option and prices. They may have one service is better than another. And so multi-cloud strategies are going to be part of the future for many organizations, including in its use in media and entertainment. And it requires, of course, data management that can span data in the clouds and locally. And that's one of the big challenges for that, not having more copies of content that you need, but having enough to give you the protection you require and to enable people to do their work. And there are many companies offering ways to manage multi-cloud storage and other services. So here's a look at, from, again, our 2020 Digital Storage Media and Entertainment Report on our projections for cloud storage revenues out to 2025 due to archiving and preservation, video on demand, various other types of distribution technologies, master broadcast networks, and also post-production. And we see, although we had some growth in 2020, because the production work was down, it did not show the growth that we think it will show in the future due to the increasing use of the cloud, driven by our experiences, but also due to, of course, the higher complexity of this rich immersive content that we're going to be creating. And projections something like $2.5 billion of cloud storage revenue by 2025. So in summary, COVID-19 had a big impact on the media and entertainment industry. It shut us down, slowed production work, but the work that was able to be done was done because of the cloud. This has matured a lot of these technologies for remote work and interaction. That should make continued remote work possible. It's going to involve continued and higher level than in the past use of cloud resources like storage. So this will continue to grow. Multi-cloud will become a more important factor going forward, and there will be continued drive for more immersive content require even larger amounts of data for media and entertainment projects, both on the premise and in the clouds. And finally, just a bit about this report I referred to. You can find that at the tomcoughlin.com Tech Papers page. Also, you can find every year, annually, we've done a storage on media and entertainment professionals and their use of digital storage. There's a high-level summary of the 2020 survey, which is again on that Tech Papers page at tomcoughlin.com. And we're currently running our survey for the 2021 survey right now. So be glad to invite you to participate in that. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to turn it back over to Ray for his discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. That was fantastic. I think that did a great job sort of setting the table for the discussion we're about to have, given everything that's happened really over the last year and change. When you kind of see you walk through it that way, it's somewhat mind-blowing, right? All that has happened in such a short amount of time. So one of the things I'd ask, right, given this is what you do, you study this all the time, and you're talking to customers, media companies, and certainly the suppliers. Have you noticed any change in terms of attitudes towards how people are going about sort of developing their storage strategies right now that all these factors have now sort of become very important, right? Remote working, cloud as a service adoption, right? The move to away from CapEx to OpEx. Have you noticed any changes when talking with really any of those sort of key stakeholders?
Sure. Well, and there's changes that are driven by the pandemic and changes that are being driven by technology. The pandemic, of course, connectivity of your storage and its ability for remote access is an important factor. And so we've seen growth in storage that facilitates that. Of course, storage in media and entertainment, is quite a bit different than general IT storage. It has to support streaming content that glitches will get in the way of the production work. And these are often very rich content. It may even be uncompressed content that you're using for these workflows. So it has specialized requirements, but we've seen connectivity grow. The other thing is support in general, the increasing in the richness of this content, both the quantity and the size of the individual video frames, AV frames. Things like the use of NVMe storage with solid state storage, certainly for primary storage, is becoming more and more dominant. Using NVMe interface or NVMe over fabrics. Hard disk drives and tape have not gone away, however, because people want to be able to trade off performance versus cost. And as these things get bigger, if you're not actively using it, you want to keep it in a less expensive storage. So there's trends that are being driven in terms of sharing stuff. And also, when you're looking at these cloud-based resources, of building these for these hyperscale types environments. And so a lot of that software-driven environments, it may involve a pooling of resources, aggregation, a composable infrastructure possibly. But of course, in the media and entertainment space, this has to be done without impacts on latency and impact on uninterruptible content delivery that the industry requires. So I think those are some of the trends that we're seeing that are being accelerated, again, both by COVID, but also the general change in technologies that are available now for storage.
And how about you? I know you're talking to customers all the time. Are you hearing very similar things to what Tom described?
Yeah, pretty similar. It's I need to be able to get at that media wherever it is, wherever I am, wherever the team is. Some of our customers last year were saying, they implemented stuff that a few weeks or months earlier they would have just flatly, if it had been in a meeting, they were saying I would have thrown the table over and walked out. But they went and implemented it. Things did change.
Mm-hmm.
And to a degree, it was actually accelerating kind of some of those trends that were coming. But yeah, one of the big important aspects is, in a way, the editor sits down, they want to edit, they don't really want to care where the media is. It might be in the cloud, it might be on-prem, it might be on a cache on their machine. Sort of getting to that point, getting to that point where the media is just sort of where it's needed at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the other thing that I thought was really interesting, Tom, was the chart you showed at the very beginning and the amount of storage that's landed in data centers. Mm-hmm. And then the challenge, like you just said, Ed, is being able to sync not just obviously the media, but all the metadata and everything else that goes around it to deliver the experience you're talking about, which is I want to be able to just basically use an application, do a search. I really don't care where my stuff is. I just want to know that it's A, secure, and B, that I can get at it, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing in the trends.
Yeah, it's that whole management of data, keeping track of what's where things are, having the copies where you need them to be, but not more copies than you need. Those are all really important aspects of, I think, a successful use of cloud and in general of storage resources.
Yeah, and as this matures, right, it's not going to just be on-prem or in a cloud. It's going to be, like you said, maybe it's in multiple different clouds, or maybe it's in multiple different geos and regions. And then you have to think about disaster recovery and backup, right, and all of those components too, right, Ed? I mean, there's a lot to consider here. We're still, I think, still as fast as things are happening now, we're still kind of at the beginning of a lot of these, I guess, this journey, right, in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. Somebody touched on it there. Security is a big deal. Some of the sort of make do workflows that got put in place last year, weren't ideal for the security aspect. And there was the notion it was going to be a couple of weeks. Don't worry about it. Well, we're still here. So the security team is sort of coming back saying, no, you really need to make it secure. Obviously, though, that media is the crown jewels for our customers. That is the content they're making. So making sure it's secure, in all ways, protecting the media, but also, security of who's got access to it, who, and even down to logging, like who looked at this, who's, had access to it in the past, kind of stuff. So security is going to be a big thing going forward.
Access control is important. Another interesting thing, of course, is end-to-end encryption. And in the NVMe group, I've even heard of individual key management. It's a big part of that. Individual transaction encryption. In other words, there's a separate encryption key for every interaction, and just being able to do that key management to do that, it's going to be very interesting how that's going to drive things. But I think there's new tools significant new tools to improve the security of rich media content.
Yeah, without impacting performance, right?
That's the ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yes.
So-
And that might drive in things eventually like more computational storage or accelerator technologies, for example, to do some of these functions, or even built into the storage devices.
The other thing your data shows is that as the pandemic starts to ease in various different parts of the world and people return to production, it's natural to expect that storage, adoption and or purchases will return. But recently, a recent phenomenon, of course, is the chip shortage, which we're all just sort of just now kind of wrapping our heads around. Do you think that will, have a negative impact on the ability to see that recovery happen as if, as it maybe would have without the chip shortage?
So the chip shortage, of course, there's a lot of things that are made with semiconductors, and there's distinctions between say logic type applications and memory type applications. Now there's sort of a boom and bust cycle in the semiconductor memory industry, caused by the fact that these fabs cost billions of dollars to build. For instance, a 3D NAND factory may cost over $10 billion to build one of these things. So they tend to build them when times are good and they're making money, but then everyone builds their factories, they come online 18 months later, and then the price will drop as a consequence, because there's an oversupply until demand grows to meet that supply, and now the prices are up, and now they invest in new plants. There's kind of the cyclicality that you run into, certainly in the memory industry, DRAM and NAND in particular. But the big shortages, I think, right now have been on the logic side of things, of specialized processors for automobiles, for example, to enable AI implementation, driver assisting capabilities, and all the new features they have in order to make vehicles more efficient. That's sort of one of the big things they've talked about. And part of that is that apparently during the pandemic, people expected they'd need less of some things, and so they decommitted on their orders. There's at least some of this that went on, and then the fab guys then diverted resources to making other things. And so when the people like the automotive folks came back and said, "Oh, I need more," they said, "Well, we don't have any right now. We'll have to build more." So those are some of the factors. Now, there's an odd thing happening right now, which is kind of related to that, and that is there's a new type of cryptocurrency that's based upon storage capacity and use, and available storage, and Chia is an example of one of these cryptocurrencies. And so that's actually been driving demand for hard disk drives and SSDs in Asia in particular, to do this new type of cryptocurrency mining that's based on storage capacity. And I heard yesterday, I think Western Digital said that it had grown from like 0 to 5 exabytes of hard disk drive storage that people were buying to do this cryptocurrency mining, right? So that may have some impact on storage capacity, including that of solid state drives going forward. So these are interesting macro events that are happening with the storage,
That's an interesting dynamic for sure.
Indeed.
Crypto. Well, the other interesting thing too that's been happening in the market is, certainly people have adopted, say, subscriptions for various different services, right? So we, Avid, offer quite a bit now in the way of subscriptions for certainly Media Composer and other types of services. But we're starting to see a trend where people are looking for subscription or storage almost as a service, if you will, right? Even on-prem. Are you seeing any of that, Tom? And if so, what's the pickup, in your opinion, of a sort of a financial model like that?
Sure. In the going beyond just the media and entertainment space, I've seen a lot of storage equipment vendors that are now taking more of a subscription model on their storage capacity. Even though the storage capacity is sitting on sites, you pay based on how much you use. It's becoming more common. I've seen some of the larger equipment vendors that are going to this model. I expect that it also will become more common in the media and entertainment industry, as the industry embraces more on this concept of paying by operating expense versus capital expense, and that we're going to see a lot more of this sort of these economic models. Even the storage capacity is sitting there, you pay for what you use, right? In fact, even some of the big cloud services are now selling are now providing, again, not necessarily for media and entertainment, but for a broader use. They're providing resources that include computation and some storage that may be located on premise for one of their customers. AWS, I think Azure does that, and others. So I think it is a developing trend, and I think it is eventually going to be embraced also in the media and entertainment industry.
And I know we're giving this a lot of thought as well. What do you think?
Oh, we definitely have that request. There's some challenges in making the model work when you're actually shipping all the hardware, but yeah, sort of two dynamics. People want that OpEx thing. They don't want to put down the big CapEx every 5 to 6 years, but also the flexibility that some people, sort of see a big future in the cloud, but they're not quite ready to do it yet. So rather than buying a big capital purchase, a Nexus, or storage in general on-prem, they're sort of saying, hey, maybe if I could subscribe to that for a couple of years and then move when I'm ready. So there's a couple of business drivers there that we certainly see. Yeah.
Now it does leave you holding the inventory essentially on the storage, right? Because you essentially own it; they're just renting it. Yep. If you could have that in such a way that people be secure, but then you could share those unused resources with other people, there might be some interesting models there.
Yeah, we're looking at it, and we're open to ideas as well.
Yeah,
All right, so now let's turn our attention to media companies and studios and sort of their thoughts as it relates to building out in order to support a distributed workforce. Tom, in your travels and discussions, do you notice anything in particular in terms of how, given all the factors you mentioned, high dynamic range, high resolutions, higher bitrate content, more of it being created, more and more movies getting, shot because of the increased competition from the OTT service providers, right? So driving that demand for more and more content. What do you see in terms of strategies around sort of the deployments, right? And on-prem, cloud, hybrid, anything there that is interesting that you've noticed?
Well, I think one of and you pointed it out, is that we've seen an awful lot of production now being driven by the guys that are actually delivering the content through the cloud, right? Like Netflix or Amazon Prime, for examples. But everyone and their brother, even the conventional studios, have gotten into that act. Everyone's trying to, and I don't see that diminishing. Eventually, I think there will be consolidation, but it doesn't seem to be that there's acquisitions going on, but it seems like it's a growing trend rather than a declining trend of the number of people that are driving new production. Okay. And this is going to, and that combined with the fact that they want to do the best, highest, most immersive type of content they can, certainly to capture the content for editing it, that's going to be driving storage demand, I think, enormously. So, as we get back to being able to, work in a new way, but have the option of doing on-set work, that we're going to see that it's going to be different. It's going to involve remote work as well as local work, but it's going to be using a lot more collaborative resources, whether they're on premise or in the clouds, including storage.
Yeah. Ed, what do you think? I mean, anything that you've noticed in your many discussions with many media companies?
Oh, same thing, really. Just it's all about more. They need more. They want, it's all got to be higher quality. People are getting more and more discerning, that's for sure. And even Amazon recently picked up MGM, so another big studio got acquired. It speaks to they just want to be able to have that content. James Bond, he's still a winner.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the more recent Bond films are actually really good too. Okay, the other challenge too, when people think about the cloud, right, and sort of the big hurdle beyond security, typically is cost, right? And even as cost of storage in the cloud is dropping, right, in general, people are still concerned about where is the total cost of ownership measurement versus what I have on prem versus what it would cost me to store the same types of assets in the cloud. And in the pandemic, business continuity became very important. People were looking at it like, okay, I should have a cloud scenario that's almost mirrors what I can do on prem in the event that something awful happens again, right? So are you seeing, Tom, anything there as it relates to where we're going to cross that threshold where it makes sense to put a significant amount of my archive, for example, into the cloud. And then when it is there, right, there's certainly a ton of benefits, right? You mentioned in your presentation, right, like auto extraction of metadata, right? Enhancing search, right? And being able to make that content really a liquid asset as opposed to, you know, having it just sit on a tape someplace, right? Without any metadata or limited metadata that may or may not be accurate, right? So have you noticed anything there? Do you see a tipping point?
Well, yes and no, and it all depends. You know, there's a lot of factors that individual organizations have to take in terms of their costs and opportunities. If you move data around or move it between clouds, for example, move it between on-premise and the cloud, you know, or move it between clouds, there may be costs associated with that.
Right.
You know, so that's an important factor. On the other hand, a lot of the stuff is happening in the cloud now, and the content's going to go into the cloud. So I think some of the big keys and some of the big opportunities here are going to be in the management of data and the optimization of those business opportunities and the costs of doing business and the efficiency and of how I can use these cloud resources, because by their very nature, when you lease stuff, you know, over the long run, it costs more than if you buy it, right? And I think as a consequence of that, we're going to see a lot more movement to the cloud, but also we're going to see there'll be things where it makes sense for organizations, depending upon their technical skills, to do stuff both on-premise and in the cloud. So I don't see the on-premise going away. In fact, maybe never going away, because you still need to cache up content and you process it locally to do stuff, right? Especially if you have the internet by its nature is unreliable, right? And so you always have to cache stuff to make it work. So there's going to be a dynamic play, I think, between the business opportunities, the performance characteristics you need, the resources available, and the cost of those resources and where you put them to make that happen. And that's going to lead some interesting decisions. It will be different for different organizations. And it'll be interesting, I think, in the long run to see how those decisions play out and what are the most successful approaches in order to meet particular enormous business opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, agreed. And what do you see similar or anything else we should hit on there?
Yeah, and as Tom said, there's a lot of different variables. So, you know, at first blush today, you know, it looks like it's expensive in the cloud, and then egress can be a problem. Egress can add up, but then it's about being smart about it. I think even Ray, you said, you know, make it that data pool, make it liquid, make it accessible, you know, and that's something we've had as a request for as long as, you know, the 10 years or more I've been at Avid, you know. So leveraging the cloud to make stuff more available, you know, and more enriched is, you know, then it's worthwhile. And, you know, obviously having the different tiers of storage in the cloud gives you some optimization. You know, the very high performance cloud is expensive. The very, you know, cool archive kind of storage is very cost effective. And I think Tom even mentioned, you know, the management and the placement between those tiers and being able to pull it back. That's kind of where the trick's going to be, but you know, that's where a lot of the effort is. That's where a lot of the invention is. So, yeah, we're certainly on that path. We're going to get there.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, because you know, you think about the old HSM models, right, where you were migrating content from tier 1 to tier 2 to archive and back. But typically, that was, you know, maybe it was in a single facility, or even if it was in multiple facilities, right? It just seemed like you know, we kind of had that problem sort of solved. But now you have this really new dynamic where multiple clouds, multiple storage devices, and multiple geographies, right? And it's just becoming very, very complicated. Right? So then see how it all goes.
And then you're going to have to throw that whole security in there, because this is valuable content, right? So yeah.
And then you're going to have to distribute that. And, you know, that's the other interesting thing is where people will go on the distribution side, not just B2B, but ultimately B2C, right? And sort of, again, feeding that insatiable demand for more and more content, right? And so devising a strategy longer term that allows you to do that so that you don't have to constantly move stuff around, right? It's just coming out of that one, hopefully, repository, right? So very, very interesting. So I guess one of the last things I guess I would ask is when you look at sort of technologies on the horizon from a storage perspective, is there anything that jumps out at you that you think will be a major sort of technology inflection point in the future that might change storage significantly, either on-prem, in the cloud, or both? Is there anything that you see, Tom?
There's two or three things I think that will become more important as we go on. First of all, the use of the cloud and the management of the cloud, all these things about where data is and where it should be to do particular activities, particular business functions. That's one element. Another one is growing capabilities in the fabric technologies, and this is including both memory and storage. So we've seen NVMe and the impact it's had on SSDs and the growth of fast storage networking. But there's another technology out there which is looking to do something similar to memory and break memory up from near memory to far memory, something called CXL, for example that, or Gen Z. There's a few of these protocols out there. That's another trend, I think, is to do things a little bit like what we've done with storage and now do them with memory. Another part of that is the movement in memory from volatile memory technologies to non-volatile memory technologies, which could allow, and depending upon the use, it allows you, for instance, to buy more memory that's a little bit slower than DRAM, like Optane memory that Intel's selling, and use that in addition to the DRAM. But it also allows the possibility of new emerging non-volatile memory technologies like magnetic random access memory, resistive memory, ferroelectric memory technologies that could become used as adjuncts to these other memory technologies that allow us new power saving options, which might be useful if you're in the field, for example, and which also could give you capabilities that could even eventually revolutionize the way that we build computing architectures themselves. If we replace all the caches with that are volatile right now, they go away and the power goes off, with stuff that's non-volatile. Imagine I could turn off and turn on and everything is there. I don't have to reboot anything, so I think those are some of the big trends that we're going to be seeing in the next few years that'll impact storage and memory and computing technology in general. And also, I think, as a consequence, will impact the way that we do the creative work that companies like Avid are involved in enabling. That's
great. Ed, anything you're seeing?
Nothing quite as far ranged as that. No, I'm a bit more focused on that's it's certainly, those are interesting. They will play out. I'm a little bit more on the short and the medium term, but yeah, kind of wrestling the beast to the ground and implementing some of the stuff. But right. there's stuff that'll optimize everything. Yes, for sure.
Another interesting thought I had as you were talking, Tom, was artificial intelligence and its use in management of not just the storage arrays themselves from a health and wellness perspective, but also the role it could potentially play in moving content around and making content aware when you're using applications. Right, that could definitely be something, right?
Yeah, it brings up another thing which I should have mentioned as well on the new technologies, and that is this idea of the whole idea with the slowing of Moore's law and CPU, the central processing unit capabilities, the performance improvements diminishing over time, that we've seen a lot more accelerator technologies. And this includes accelerators that are going to be doing functions that could include machine learning, artificial intelligence capabilities, and doing closer to the storage or closer to the memories. And that could basically, AI could be everywhere. I mean, in the sense of used for all sorts of different things, for management, looking at content. And if you're close to the memory, you save a lot of power because you're not moving data all over the place. You're just moving the results. It's faster, lower latency, and uses less power. These are all potentially very, very good things that could be important elements in our future storage systems, and including those supporting the media and entertainment industry.
Wow, this is great. Well, guys, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you both for being part of this today. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tom and Ed. We will just take a few questions now from the audience here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to just pull this up, which is your survey, Tom. So hopefully you can see my screen. Do you want to just talk about that real quick, Tom?
Sure. So every year for actually about 10 years now, I've been doing an annual survey of media and entertainment professionals and looking for their input on how they're using digital storage for all parts of the media and entertainment workflow, from capture, creation of content, editing, post-production, distribution, as archiving, and as well as conversion, analog to digital conversion and preservation. And so we have a survey that's open now. I'm going to leave it open for probably till the end of June here. And there's a link up at the top there, which is it's a SurveyMonkey survey. And if people could get an image of that, or we'll record this, they can take a look at that. I'd really love if you're a media and entertainment professional, if you could take that. If you do include your email address when you take the survey, we can even send you a top level version of all the input we get from the survey. It's a very interesting survey on the tomcoughlin.com website. You can actually see some of that top level results from prior surveys. So welcome people who are media and entertainment professionals to do this survey and to let their friends know about it as well. And thank you very much for letting me tell people more about the survey.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, just one of the questions actually we have is, Tom, how many inputs, generally speaking, how many companies, I guess, do you find help provide the data that ultimately supports, the annual report you produce?
Oh, well, I've got several companies that have been helping, and organizations. SMPTE, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, has helped some various folks that do work in the industry have been helping me get the word out. So a lot of people to thank, in terms of getting folks to do it. But I could use a few more inputs in the survey, and that's why I'm leaving it open a bit longer and seeing if we can get some more folks to fill it out.
Awesome. And I have one question for around Nexus and the Nexus mirror option. Question is, can you just describe the mirror option and generally speaking, how it works?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So media mirroring is sort of what it sounds. So we make a replica of all the blocks of the files on the storage within the storage system. So that does two things. That gives you the protection that if a whole engine goes away, you can still access the media, and it actually increases the bandwidth of the system because I've got two different places I can go to get the media. And one of the great things about the Nexus file system is, there's intelligence built right into the file system, and there's, and very much the client driver, that the client knows where both of those locations are. So even if an engine goes down while you're playing back, the next set of frames it's got to go get, it can get them from the alternative engine. And so the piece we did recently, so the mirroring protection has been around for quite a while. What we did recently was basically change the price and make it a whole lot more affordable. So, what we found, there was people who really had critical workflows that should have been mirror protected that weren't, and sometimes it comes down to the economics. So we responded to that. So yeah, mirror protection is great. It's very high performance, and it's actually very affordable now. Very
cool. Thanks, Ed. That's good. And then another question, Tom, for you. In all the years you've done the digital media and entertainment storage report, what is the thing that maybe surprised you the most over those years in producing that report?
Surprised me. So I guess the biggest impact is that we're able to create the very large content that can become more and more immersive. But one of the more interesting elements of it is that despite the fact that some computational capabilities that we commonly refer to as Moore's Law have slowed down, is that our ability to compress content with more advanced processing, more cores, has made it possible to use existing network bandwidth and technologies, which is slowly getting better. It's been better, a little bit slower than a lot of other things, and be able to still deliver like 4K and perhaps even higher resolution content over those networks. So we're making bigger stuff, we're making more of it, And when we go to distribute this stuff, we've got technologies that are enabling it to get onto people's televisions sitting at home, using high bandwidth internet, which these things in their raw form are huge. They would never be able to do that. It's only by these advanced compression, decompression technologies people are able to do that. So I think if I were to think of the single thing that's most amazing, that is one of them.
Yeah, it's truly become the Internet of Things nowadays, right? I mean, if you think about all the abilities that are out there now in terms of being able to deliver content or work on the internet using, a variety of protocols, and just what that's going to ultimately mean, right? In terms of being able to take all this content into a storage device sitting on-prem in the cloud, it really won't matter. And just the amount of inputs that are now going to become available. And as you layer 5G on top of that and more powerful devices, right? Phones that can do 4K, there's just so many things that can happen. And then same thing on the receive side, that content you're going to be watching is going to be even more compelling because it's going to be a higher resolution, higher bit rate, just because the capacity to deliver that will be available, right?
It's a lot easier, for instance, to build multi-camera projects and to get 360-degree video. It's becoming easier and easier to do that. And having those, wireless networks at the edge, it's 5G or Wi-Fi 6, it's going to really change the way that which we create content and the kind of content that we have. It's going to change the delivery, the way we deliver content, the technologies we're using. I've seen some really fascinating things in terms of making virtual reality more immersive. And for instance, we talked before about what happened during the pandemic. Well, one of the things is we realized, although it's the only way we could interact, I think people have a much clearer vision of the limitations of our current telecommunication technology. It's really hard to get the sense of the people the way you can if you're physically interacting with them.
Yeah.
And if we do something that could create more immersive experiences, both for just communicating, but for entertainment as well. In virtual reality, I think is a general term that we're using to describe virtual reality, augmented reality, to describe that kind of thing. I think that's going to be one of the next big pushes. And I've seen some really fascinating technologies people are talking about, like the display devices built directly on silicon with pixel counts that are like a lot more than what we have on the conventional display devices on these head-mounted devices. Mm-hmm. And in addition, if you can lower the power requirements, then the weight of these things also reduces. So I think we're going to see some fascinating stuff with bigger content made with more cameras, higher resolution, higher dynamic range. And like I say, the technology doing the computation, the compression, decompression are getting so sophisticated that we're going to be able to enjoy this, even though it's going to take a lot to make the stuff. Using the stuff is going to get easier as well. And it's going to become more commonplace, both for entertainment and also for collaborative purposes.
That's great. Well, this has been one of my favorite sessions. I want to thank you both, Ed and Tom, for taking the time to do this today. I want to thank everybody out there for participating and attending the webinar. We really appreciate you all taking the time. If you missed it, feel free to watch it on demand. We'll send it out both via the emails. We'll also send out the link if you want to do the survey as well, Tom. So we'll make sure we add that to the email that we send out. And then any questions we didn't get to, we will certainly answer those and send those out as well. So once again, thank you all. It was a great session, and we appreciate y'all, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Ed.
Yep.